We've got people joining in from all over Australia, New Zealand, and the wider world. I'm Jazda Haley. I am our commercial director based out of Australia. Joining me today, we've got Chief Daran Dodd. Daran joins us from UNC, university over in the US. The reason why we pulled together this meeting, this webinar for you today, it's to highlight and showcase the uh, leadership and response that UNC went through when they had Hurricane Helene. More closer to home here in Australia, we have wild events, weather events throughout the year, and there's events that we are still recovering from 2 or 3 events ago in the past year. What I hope for you to all get out of today's session is get a good understanding of the impacts that a wild weather can have, which we are all aware of, but more importantly, what changes need to be made. Now, we're all great at responding to them, but what changes do we need to make to better keep our people safe and our assets safe, and to help mitigate any damage, both financially and reputationally, into the future? Without further ado, I'm going to keep quiet. I'm going to hand the reins over to Chief Daran Dodd, and I hope you all enjoy this as much as I did when I watched it. Chief, over to you.
Thank you, Jazz. I appreciate you very much, and appreciate everyone from all across the lands joining me. For some, it's evening, and for others, it's morning time. So appreciate you joining me for this. Wanted to put up this visual image to get started here. One of the things that I heard over and over during the situation that we went through is we feel like we're on an island. And so I wanted to start this out by just kind of putting up this visual and saying for you to imagine yourself in your organization, if you were on an island, you didn't have communication to get out, to come back, you didn't have any way to connect with the outside world, what would you do in that situation, and how do you plan for that? So I'm going to cover 5 different topical areas today. The first one is the incident overview itself, the coordinated response that we had, technology and communications surrounding this event, lessons across all the industries, really diving into a little bit what the state of North Carolina, their after action debrief said about failures, and then future preparedness recommendations from me and my organization going through this event. So why is this globally relevant? Because this disaster impacted higher ed here, it impacted healthcare, it impacted all infrastructure systems, federal, state, local. Failures were not specific to our sector of higher ed. And so these same risks exist globally. There's climate events, there's fires every region, there's communications dependency now, internet dependency. And so all these lessons learned apply to many other regions, many other industries. So thinking about what we were preparing for, we went through early on 20 years ago when I was a police officer in this location. We went through a series of hurricanes that impacted our area. So we thought we had a good idea about what we were going to be responding to. And so leading up to right before the impact of the hurricane, we started to see national information coming out with some of these areas that I highlighted here, asking everyone, pleading with everyone, take this very seriously. This is a catastrophic event. We cannot stress the significance of this event enough. And so we knew leading up to this event that it was going to be a serious impact. And so we thought, what can we do to prepare for this? So for us, that meant we still had 1,600 students on campus. We developed what were called ride-out teams, which was a team of student affairs folks that would ride out the storm on campus. A team from my group and in police department emergency management to ride out the storm and be here on site for whatever was going to impact us. We developed pre-event partnerships prior to the storm hitting. So we had very good relationships with the city of Asheville, their municipal government. And so we knew that we had some partnerships in place. If things went real bad, we would have some partners that we could lean on. We had pre-event EOC and command posts. So prior to this event, we had had a series of protests on our campus, which a lot of campuses have faced. And so during those protests, we learned quickly about establishing an emergency operations center and establishing command posts at our police department and communicating that information back and forth. Another piece that we knew is that the prior year, the city had a water system failure during a winter storm. And so we knew that water was going to be impacted and likely sewer was going to be impacted. And so for that, we pre-ordered pallets of water to be delivered on site. And we ordered portable toilets to be delivered on site. And that would come in handy for us later on because we were one of the only organizations in this region that pre-ordered water and portable toilets. And so a lot of situations around us didn't have access to that after the storm hit. And those infrastructure needs were severely compromised. So now we'll talk a little bit about the incident overview. This is a timeline of the hurricane leading up to it. The significant piece for us that really caused us the issue is we had significant rainfall pre-Helene in our area. So 10 to 15 inches of rain hit our region before the hurricane ever hit us. And so we knew we already had some flooding, and we knew leading up to this that it was going to be a serious situation when the rains from the storm actually came in. And so moving forward, state declared a state of emergency. It made landfall as a Category 4, went up the central part through the southeast, moving inland toward us, and then it just dumped on us water, wind gusts, and for us, our area is very mountainous, so it's not used to direct impact from heavy rains and hurricanes. And so it super saturated the ground, which caused trees to fall like matchsticks everywhere. And it caused erosion and mudslides all across our region that we were just not used to. Just a little pictorial here of kind of the impact of the storm into our area. We're up here in this little yellow portion on this top left shot there, so you can kind of see as the hurricane came through, we really got hit by that outside band. So this little video I put together is some pictures. This is 4 minutes of radio traffic. So imagine, this event went on for, hours and days, significant radio traffic. And so this is 4 minutes over one channel of our fire department radio system with the city, and some pictures that I put together of our region so you can kind of see the impact and hear the impact, and then we'll talk about some of those radio transmissions.
2301 communications.
2301.
Okay, if there's any way that you can get us some help out here, we have got 3 or 4 major slides, houses involved, and people's in them.
I know, Chief. Emergency Management's working on a plan for you now.
2301, can you come up on Gary Creek and get with 2311?
Simple.
2201 comms. FY, the river overtook our main station. We got all but one apparatus up on higher ground. NC9's completely shut down multiple locations.
due to trees, lines, and mudslides, we're unable to respond to anything. We've just advised everybody to get to higher ground and shelter in place.
Copy, Chief. That's all we can do right now.
Station 14 comms.
Station 14.
Charlie, just to update everyone here's 10-4. Major landslide on Rims Creek Road around Vance Birthplace. We cannot get in or out of Rims Creek from where we are. Unable to respond to any calls as well.
Station 14, unable to respond. All units accounted for in 10-4. 9:23 hours.
Communications, Press 18 call.
Another fire company's tied up, but let them know at the 200 block of Alexander Road, there's a tree blocking the entire road. If the line's involved, we're not going to have access that way. We're backing up to the Mike Saluter now and heading trying this way.
Gotcha.
Station 3-2 to comms.
Station 13
communication.
Sir, we are out of service. We have about 3 foot of water in our station. Personnel's okay. Trucks have been evacuated and taken to higher ground. We are out of service.
19, go ahead.
1913 to communication.
1913, go ahead.
On scene, 84 Haiti Road. Everyone is out of the residence. We do have power lines down, smoldering on the ground, and a large propane tank. No active structure fire at this time. I know fire company's busy, but we could use them if they can get to us.
Understood.
2301 to communications.
2301.
Okay, if we can get some equipment coming our way, we're going to have sawyers, we're going to have some equipment, move stuff out of the way, because we're probably going to have some ambulances in here.
I'll pass that along.
1913 comms. Keep French Broad units coming. If you've got mutual aid coming, you can put them in service for now.
Okay, engine 19, continue on. Brush 18, tanker 18, you're in service.
Jake, it's tanker 18. We're on the scene now.
We're good down here, Roger. If y'all got the personnel, if you want to help cover our district for a little bit until we can get cleared up a little. If not, do what you got to do.
We can take care of it. Can you switch over to French Broad?
Right. So hopefully you could hear that okay. What I really want you to take away from this is, you hear during that brief little clip of communication, some things like we've got 3 or 4 major mudslides. The river overtook our main station, meaning completely overtook the fire department. They had to move their vehicles out of their station. And this was multiple fire stations that had water that just completely inundated their stations. They mentioned mudslides here and having to move their vehicles, their apparatus to higher ground to get it away from water. And so, you hear at one point they say we are out of service completely. So the biggest takeaway from this that I want you to think about is, if the responders that I'm leaning on to come and save us aren't available, they can't come to save you, they're out of service. What do you do and how do you plan for that? Is the most significant piece on that. So that was just 4 minutes of one channel, one fire channel. Imagine that all across our region, police, fire, emergency management, EMS, all with radio traffic like that. So pretty significant. So as all of this started to unfold, all of our infrastructure in the area was completely compromised. We lost power, we lost cell phone signals, we lost internet, we lost radio communication. When I say radio communication, I mean our state Viper radio system was out of service at one point, and we couldn't use it, which is what my agency operates off of. And so we had to really pivot quickly and figure out what are we going to do in that kind of situation. And then, of course, loss of water and sewer, which is probably one of the most significant impacts for us because it was long term. So UNC Asheville impact, 87 to 105 mile per hour winds in this area, 30.78 inches of rain. We could not get vehicle fuel in the area because there was power loss. So we had issues bringing in our personnel. We had issues refueling our vehicles. This picture here is one of our trucks in our parking lot. We were running outside during the storm trying to move vehicles to keep trees from falling on our cars so we would have vehicles to respond to incidents. No fire or EMS response capabilities. At one point, every entrance to our campus was completely blocked by trees. We had to pull our chainsaw teams back in, which meant if we had a significant medical emergency, which we did, we could not get fire and EMS into our campus to respond to those. And then overarching, there was this worry about one of the dams breaking and rushing water this way. One of the 7 bladders was broken. We're talking 1 billion gallons of water. This was a radio transmission that a civilian facilities type worker from that area put out communication, just saying that they were worried that the dam was going to break.
We're at the water plant, Beatree Road. Our dam looks like it's weakening. It's bluffing. We can't get in touch with anybody.
And so the town of Black Mountain, which is where that reservoir is near, actually at one point their chief said that they realized at one point that they were likely going to die during the situation, and they were going to save everyone they could until the dam broke and washed their city away. Fortunately, it held mostly. They had significant damage in their area from flooding, but the actual full reservoir of the dam did not break. For us, right after the storm, we had no dining staff because of preparation for this. They didn't think it was going to be such a high impact event. We had food and supply shortage, no running water, of course, which makes it difficult to feed our students. Natural gas was shut off because power was shut off, which we didn't know. We thought we would be able to cook if the power was out. We learned real quickly that was not the case. And so we had to pivot really quickly and figure out how are we going to feed all these students that are on campus? What are we going to do to improvise in this situation and take care of these folks until we can figure out what the situation is. This is a little video just showing the line of students lined up to get food after the storm impact and us trying to figure out what we were going to do. So you can see a very, very, very long line of folks waiting to get dinner. And us at this point trying to figure out what are we going to do? Is it even safe for them to be out? So the first 48 hours after the storm hit, our county emergency management, emergency services was completely overwhelmed. At the time, they did not have shelters pre-set to be in place for the impact of the storm. So as the storm was unfolding, as this response was unfolding, they were trying to figure out what are we going to do? Where do we set up shelters at? How do we help the misplaced people from this storm? Roads were blocked completely across the entire western region, which caused us issues trying to get help in here to us. The major highway leading to where we're at was completely shut down. And so help had to actually respond from down into another state and come up into our region to help us. Landslides, bridges washed away, rescue and recovery efforts at one point were deemed unsafe, and they were told not to respond to anything else. And real quick, that picture in the top right, that is one of our campus buildings in the background. Same with this one, the top right, that is one of our buildings. In the water level, you can see how high it was. Bottom left, I really wanted to show here, this is a bypass connector line that they had to put back together in order to get water back to our region, which was about 14 days. And so I wanted to show the size of that one piece of pipe that they had to put back in place to get water for us. This is a picture from 2004. I mentioned that other hurricane we responded to 20 years ago. This is the same building. So I want to show you the difference in water level here from 20 years later, and how much more impact we had this time. Let's talk about the coordinated response. So we made a request when we were able to. We need satellite communication. We need Starlinks. We need cell phones. We needed interoperable radio channels. We were asking for search and rescue teams, National Guard to come in and help, medical pods to be able to get folks medication. We were asking for fuel for our vehicles and for generators, backup generators and power systems, food and water rations, and sanitation for showers and restrooms. And this is an actual picture of all of the resources headed our way after a couple days of us being on our own, trying to get to us through the highway. So, of course, disaster assistance started to arrive. FEMA search and rescue, water trucks, fuel trucks, portable showers, toilets. Actual Title X military soldiers arrived on our campus in our region. Military helicopters were landing. And so this is just a quick picture. The one on the top left and the top right are both on our campus. That's FEMA setting up operations. At this point, we're trying to figure out how do we logistically handle all the resources that we've asked for now. Now that we've been sparse on resources, we didn't have what we needed, and now we have more than we need coming in all at once. How do we prepare for that? One of the recurring themes that we kept hearing over and over was felt like a war zone. And so this is why. For weeks, we had helicopters flying over. Those are actual military soldiers. You see our building in the background. The bottom right picture is a helicopter that actually landed on our campus. Early on, a parent was actually delivering some supplies to the campus for us before we were able to get communication out and get military assistance here. Just showing some resources arriving for us and us logistically trying to handle that. So, water trucks, fuel, portable toilets, cellular connectivity. So this is just some of the sustained operations. So we had power loss for 14 days. Water system was out for 60 days. Cellular service was out for multiple days. We had looting and civil unrest in the area. We had to have sustained perimeter control of our campus due to looting, degraded infrastructure and access. Showing the scale of the response, we had 490 different law enforcement deployed to our area, 1,300 responders. We had 39 of 50 states that actually responded here. And then we had incident management teams that deployed from other states and had to actually take over to give some relief to our folks that were stuck in Emergency Operations Center for days on end. The Army Corps of Engineers responded at some point and conducted a water filtration system on our campus. This was done for us to be able to bring students back to campus, but also to test how do we remove turbidity out of the water? How do we make the water clean and filtrate the water so that people can drink it, so that they could then do that for the entire city of Asheville, which the reservoir was compromised. It's just a top picture of the actual filtration system. So it was a huge operation. that we had to help them set up. This is on our campus. So they brought water in from the city. It was dirty water, filtrated it through this system to then push it back out on our campus to provide actual drinkable water. Showing some recovery operations. So we had to start setting up water distribution sites, food distribution, medical tents, all that for this area. Debris removal was a major issue for our region because there was trees down everywhere, which caused us to not be able to access things like our radio towers. When the generators on the radio towers ran out of gas, we were not able to access those to get gas in them to run the generators, which is why our radio system went down for the entire region. Looking at technology and logistics, we eventually, early on, attached ourselves to the Emergency Operations Center with the city of Asheville. That was the first chance we had to get information out of our region about what was taking place here. And so if you've never seen them, there's cows and colts, cellular on wheels, and cellular on light trucks. That is how we were able to get cell phone connectivity in early on. Thank goodness for these responders that came in from several different companies to try to get connectivity. One of the issues that we had is there were hundreds of people outside of our emergency operations center, and they were actually trying to figure out what to do, trying to get cell phone connectivity. The emergency operations center that we were in was not a secure site. And so all of these people that were outside the center were actually using the bandwidth of the cell signals that we were trying to use for emergency purposes. And so one of the things we had to pivot on is whitelisting phone numbers at the emergency operations center to make sure that our responders who were in the EOC could actually use the cell phone connectivity without that bandwidth getting reduced from all the people using those. So obviously everything runs on internet now. We didn't realize what a huge deal Starlink was going to be for us. And so Emergency Operations Center had a couple of Starlink systems up and running. Same issue. We had people connecting to those Starlinks and using the bandwidth on the internet. And so we had to password protect that, come up with a system for only first responders to be able to connect to those Starlink systems. And again, that was our only ability to get out to the general public what was happening. Are people safe? What resources do we need in this area? What kind of help do we need? So logistics, again, when all these things started to happen, all these resources started to arrive, we had to figure out what are we going to do. So we started developing operations plans, scheduling and assigning mutual aid personnel, which became a major undertaking. We've got hundreds and hundreds of different personnel coming in from all across the state, all across the U.S. How are we going to keep track of those personnel? How are we going to get them on a common radio channel? How are we going to feed them and house them? We actually ended up pairing up with the city and feeding fire, police, and other first responders for weeks, not just those serving us, but those serving the entire city and the entire county and region. And so, of course, organizing the EOC, providing site security. So now we had fuel trucks on our campus and we had water on our campus that no one else had. And so we had to then figure out how are we going to provide security for these sites that are on our campus to make sure that law enforcement and military can come in and get refueled, come in and get water, without someone trying to come and loot those things. It's technology utilization. Thank you to CriticalArc and for having this conference. And one of the reasons they do is so I can talk about some of the utilization that we had during the storm from them. So one of the pieces that we used was OmniGuard. And once we were able to get cell phone connectivity, we had some emergency cell phones delivered to us that had connectivity. And what we did is we downloaded OmniGuard onto those phones so that we could track the responders that were on our campus that we didn't have radio access to. So all those responders that were out manning barricades and manning those fuel trucks and those water trucks, we needed to make sure we could track those folks and make contact with them if we needed to push out emergency information. And so OmniGuard is how we did that. This is just a few of the messages that we sent out. Key point here is I always say during this that relationships matter. They will always matter. And so for us, when we had no connectivity whatsoever, when I got to the city EOC and we were able to connect with that emergency cell signal, one of the first calls I made was to our partners at CriticalArc. And I asked them, hey, is there any way that you can push out some messages for us, because we can't do it. We have no way to get messaging out. And so some of these messages that you see that don't begin with Bulldog Alert are actually our partners all the way across the United States and Colorado from CriticalArc, who were able to send out some messages for us remotely, letting people know that, hey, we're safe. Utilize this phone number if you need to call University Police, and kind of some of the things that were going on. Some of these other pieces, I just wanted to kind of show how important communication is. This is just a small snippet of communication that we were putting out as we were getting access to the internet within the Emergency Operations Center, showing folks that, this is what's going on. Don't go outside. It's very dangerous. Our hearts are with you for those that had lost everything. So one of the pieces here, the state emergency response team did an after action review, and they said success in implementing these improvements will require sustained commitment from leadership at all levels of North Carolina's emergency management system, adequate resource allocation, and regular assessment of process. The goal is not simply to address the specific challenges faced during Hurricane Helene, but to build an emergency management system capable of meeting future challenges while effectively serving current needs. The reason I like to read that out in its entirety is for folks to understand that our state emergency management team was not ready for the impact that we had. And so a critical piece here is get ready now, and put the resources where they need to be to get ready, because one day this event may not be a hurricane, but something like this is going to happen. And you're going to have to figure out how do I sustain operations for 2 weeks or a week without help coming. I think help's going to be here. I think the government's going to come help. But when they aren't able to, what are you going to do to sustain? So they identified these 3 critical areas as issues. So emergency operations organization and staffing was an issue. Obviously, interoperability, communications, and data was a major issue. And then logistics and resource allocation was a huge issue. They were inundated with information coming into the Emergency Operations Center, and they were trying to figure out how do we get resources to that area and where do we put them. Couple things that they mentioned was inefficient resource management. So 58% of the responders indicated the resources were not allocated effectively. State EOC requests were overwhelming, incomplete, and lacked pertinent information. So they weren't getting information out properly and getting people where they needed to go properly. And the information that was coming in was coming to 2 people at 2 computers trying to figure out where to put all the information or all the resources in this region. State Web EOC was technologically overwhelmed. We have to make requests through our county for resources to the state, and our county emergency management was completely inoperable at the time for us to be able to make those requests early on. They talk about supply chain vulnerabilities, weakness in pre-positioning and vendor coordination. Where we didn't have contracts in place with vendors prior to this event. And so they had to, on the fly, figure out how do we negotiate with these vendors and how do we get them into this area. Obviously, I mentioned the terrain was completely hampered. So once they did negotiate those contracts and those resources for us, how did they get them into our area? All of that had to be figured out logistically. So future preparedness recommendations. I told Jazz early on, I could do this there's so many things I could put in here. This could be a 40-hour presentation, but I wanted to hit the high areas for you to have some really good takeaways from this. So logistics, operational coordination. So maintain adaptable operations plans. Put those plans together now. You can change them as things happen, but start putting those plans together now. Organize and structure the EOC for efficiency. So establish clear roles, decision-making authority. So give decision-making authority to those who you know can carry that out, and make sure that you're organizing things so that information is flowing from the emergency operations center out to those folks that are actually carrying out things on the ground. Personnel management, assign and manage mutual aid resources effectively, track personnel in real time, accountability and safety. Mentioned that already. Ensure continuity through shift planning and relief cycles. One of the issues we had here, to be honest, is people like me who are in leadership positions. I wanted to be here all the time, the entire time for the event, to make sure my people were okay. And at some point, as a leader, we're going to become ineffective because we're tired. And so, fortunately, I have a relationship with my command staff where they pulled me into a room at one point and said, "We've got an intervention for you here, Chief. You need to go home and get some rest. We're forcing you to go home, and we're going to take over right now." So build those relationships with your leadership team early on. Sustainment of logistics. We talked about providing feeding, housing, basic needs for personnel. We had to figure that out on the fly. We've got 30 people coming in. Where are they going to sleep? Where do we get mattresses from? How are they going to go to the bathroom? Where are we going to get them food and water? Long-term resource distribution, 2 weeks is what I've been telling people. Start to think about, how do you get sustainment for 2 weeks? Does that mean drilling wells? Does that mean having cisterns with water? Does that mean having portable toilets on hand all the time for folks? How can you sustain for 2 weeks in your organization? Secure critical sites, site points, water distribution. We already talked about that. Control access and maintain order in high demand areas. Protect personnel, resources, and infrastructure. One of the things we had to do is figure out all the resources coming in. If all of our entrances are barricaded, how do we know who's allowed to be here and who's not? And so we had to come up with a system for identifying those folks. So we created these little passes that we handed out to essential personnel. And we said, hey, if you're manning a barricade on our entrance and someone shows this pass to you, it means they're allowed to be here and come in and tap into these resources. Further recommendations, don't ever overestimate your capabilities. One of the issues that we looked at is we thought we were going to be fine. We thought we would be good for a day or two, not realizing this was going to be a sustained event. As I mentioned before, conduct 2 weeks needs assessment, water, fuel, power, evacuation. Think about all those things ahead of time. Pre-plan for evacuation operations, evacuee support. So we had 1,600 students here. We decided to cease operations. How do we move those 1,600 students out? For kids who don't know how to use it, anything but a phone for GPS, and they can't get connectivity, how are we going to map them out to get them out of the region to a safe place? We had to hand draw maps, like MapQuest, like the old days, and hand out maps and explain to them how to use them. The other piece was they're college students. None of them had a full tank. So they've got no gas. How do we get them out of here? And so we tapped into our fuel that we had on campus, and we gave 10 gallons of gas to every person that needed it to get them out of the region to safety. So pre-plan for mental health interventions, both students for campuses and first responders. Some of our responders, and I didn't talk about it during this situation, but we had an officer that was severely impacted during this event, lost many family members, and was there on site during the rescue operations. And so he came back along with our other staff who had operated for days on end. How do we get them mental health resources to make sure they're able to do their job to keep others safe. Process issues, ensure resource request capabilities are in place, redundant emergency messaging systems, make sure that your PIOs have access to be able to send emergency messages. We had a little situation for that. We couldn't get the normal people in our communications department here. And so we had to figure out on the fly, how are we going to get the folks that are here access to be able to send out emergency messaging for us to sustain that messaging during this event? Check your radio system infrastructure, make sure you got backups in place. Update employee contact information. We learned during this, when we couldn't make contact with our employees, we had to send teams out to people's houses to make sure they were okay and to determine when they were able to come back and come back to work and provide resources for us. So we had to do that early. One of the things that we put into place is we request all officers now to take their radios home with them so that if there's an event, they have predetermined check-in times. So they know if something like this happens, I'm going to turn my radio on and see if I can make connectivity with the police department to let them know that I'm okay so they don't have to send a team out. Identify personnel needing access to secure sites and create an identification method. I already talked about that. Pre-pack communication go bags. So think about the things, what are the things I need to have on hand if my communication center is overwhelmed, if something happens, it's non-serviceable. Chargers, batteries, hotspots. We built go boxes now that we have in place so we can move our entire emergency communication center at a moment's notice to a different location. We had vehicle keys and documents that got flooded. And so think through, if something like this is coming, how do I move those sensitive items to a place where they're not going to get ruined and damaged? Emergency Operations Center is really important. Ensure that that there's representation from all the different stakeholders in the EOC. It takes everyone in a situation like this. IT, human resources, not just police and fire and emergency medical, but student resources, health and counseling. All those different aspects have to be present in the EOC. Another big thing is restricting access to the EOC, making sure that there's not just anybody coming in and out of this secured area. This is a place to conduct serious business. There's sensitive information being shared in an EOC. So you need to restrict the access to people getting in and out of that restricted area and make that a safe place for the responders and the stakeholders in there to be able to coordinate. Ensuring coordination between the EOC and the field responders, we kind of touched on that already. And then establishing a battle rhythm. That was something that was really important for us is timing. We set up times every day for briefing. We set up meal times, which was critically important for us to have that little bit of a break, get the responders meals, have them allow them to have a little bit of downtime, and also know when are these meetings going to take place and when are these meal times going to take place. Getting toward the end here. Wanted to throw this in real quick. Crisis management versus crisis leadership. Just as a reminder that crisis management is the tactical response to a situation. Crisis leadership is more strategic. It's vision. It's direction. It's after the situation's happened. The leaders of the organization are not there to necessarily respond to the critical situation. They're likely there to figure out, how do we have continuity of operations? How do we keep things going? What's the next decision, critical leadership decision that we have to make that's going to keep us sustained, that's going to protect our students, that's going to get us back up and running? So important to talk about that, because in times, where I've done tabletop exercises, we get leaders who necessarily aren't first responders, but they want to get out there and they want to respond to the critical incident. And we have to remind them that that's not your job necessarily. Your job is just as important, is to make sure we take care of these other people on campus, other people in the healthcare facilities. How do we make decisions about when we're going to have classes next? What are the critical messages that need to be put out? Just some best practices, adapt to crisis mindset. Really what this boils down to is think about this right now. Start developing plans right now. Conduct tabletop exercises right now. Get to know those in different departments from you. If you don't normally work with IT and with operations and with human resources, work with those people now. Don't test it when something actually happens. Test it early on. Do do scenarios, bring in a consulting team to run some of these tabletop exercises for you. Learn where the failures are now so that you don't have those failures when something like this happens. It's a little slide I like to throw at the end. Through Helene and high water, one team, one mission. This is a group of campuses from all over the state that came and helped us. We'll never forget what they did for us to help us during this situation. And so we truly did. We truly say all across the state now that we are one team, one mission. We all had that one mindset during this and bringing us back up and functional. That's it, Jazz.
That's the third time I've watched that back, and every time it's the impact that it has on me. Okay, I'm lost for words. Folks who are still with us online, we've got a Q&A component inside Zoom, so feel free to ping through any messages. We've got Sienna on the other side who will be moderating them. Between some questions coming through, Chief, I've got a few that's come up. What we hear with our institutions that we work with is these things are all great to put in place to help these mitigation strategies, but it's funding. Funding is one thing that's always gets impacted, and especially with now what's going on with the global economics and funding resourcing is becoming more and more scarce. From this event, and more broadly speaking, how have you managed to secure better funding for your institution?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things with that. One is plans are great until they don't work. And I said pre-plan, but plans are always going to change in the midst of a situation like this. And so from a funding perspective, one, it's making sure that leaders understand, organizational leaders who are not first responders, to understand the critical importance of this and how, when something happens, their leadership is going to be tested, their decisions are going to be amplified. And so they need to think about those things now. They should never have to worry about the question coming up, hey, you're a leader of this organization and you didn't fund this, you didn't prepare for this. Now this is on you. And so, and we can't fund everything immediately. It's never going to happen. And so for us, one of the critical things we did is start to identify, where were the gaps? What are things that we need to fund? How do we prioritize those? And then how do we start chipping away at that? Maybe this year we can, fund $5,000 towards something that we really need. Maybe the overall system that we need is $3 million, but we got to start somewhere, and we can't just kick the can down the road. We've got to figure out, okay, we have these critical needs. Let's apply something toward this. Let's have a plan for this. Let's have a 5-year plan, how we're going to fund these things to make sure that when something happens, and it's all hazards, it can't be just preparing for a hurricane. It's got to be, what's the critical infrastructure that we have to have in place to respond to all hazards?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I'm sure there'll be a few people here. I know I can speak on behalf of Australia who will take that message away. I've got a few more questions, if you don't mind. We seem to be doing okay on time. How can organizations better prepare for events that escalate beyond their immediate threat and control or footprint?
I would say it's what I said earlier. Relationships matter. And if you're not building those relationships right now with partners around you, you're behind the curve. You need to do that right now. You need to start having conversations with, your vendor partners right now, building those relationships. You need to start having conversations with the police department across the road from you, with the fire department down the road. We can't be siloed when something like this happens. So you have to build those relationships early on so that when something like this happens, you can respond to it and pivot immediately. Us being a smaller organization within a larger city, the city sometimes thinks to themselves, hey, there's never anything we're going to need from that small organization, that small campus over there. And they quickly found out when all this took place and we entered the emergency operations center, they really found out quickly, hey, you've got portable toilets over there. We don't have that. We don't have a way for our folks that are here in the operations center to go to the bathroom because all the sewer lines are down. They never thought that would happen. And so we bartered a portable toilet for a Starlink satellite system, and they began to realize, hey, they've got vans that can transport people. They've got areas that can feed first responders coming in the area. They've got places where first responders can sleep. Everyone has something to bring to the table. And so those partnerships are where we learn what those other organizations can provide for us and what we can provide for them.
It really does talk to that relationship component and building your long-standing relationships where you can lean on other people and go back to the old school way of bartering what I have for what you have.
Right.
Yeah. I hope you don't ever have to live through anything like this again. In the event that something like this does occur, what is the top 1 or 2 things you would like to have in place that you haven't already got in place?
For us, it's we've done a lot to build out our infrastructure since this happened. We now have redundant satellite internet service, for example, on multiple areas on our campus. Our police department has 2. We have 1 permanent and 1 mobile. We're thinking through all those things in the future now. And it's not just response to hurricane. Now it's the door's been opened for all hazards. And I didn't talk about this here due to time, but we experienced massive wildfires in our area about 6 months after this hurricane happened. And so another situation where we had to then pivot and say, what are we doing here? What if we have to evacuate? How do we handle this? And so we're starting to think about, what happens in the situation where there's a fire, an active assailant, hurricane, all hazards. What are the resources we need to prepare for all those things? Some of it's personnel, some of it's technology, cell phone redundancy, all those things. I never thought in a million years I'd have to call my partner at CriticalArc across the United States and ask him to send a message out for me. And now we start to think about satellite cell phone capabilities and things like that to be able to sustain.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, you don't even think about the other events that come straight after, right? From a weather event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
when
we're
you
still
show that,
we're 2 years in, and we're still a lot of areas are in rough shape. They haven't recovered yet.
So that was actually one of my next comments back to you was how has the recovery now gone for some of your communities? I mean, I was thinking earlier on, an image that stays clear in my mind was a McDonald's sign when we had the floods in a town called Lismore, and the drive-through sign was where the water level was. And I think, how can you recover from that? And it's a harrowing thought, and certainly people who have to experience it and live through that. We are pretty much at the top of the hour, Chief. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to add, or a message you'd like the audience to take away?
No, I just say, start the planning now. Start doing those tabletop exercises. If you don't know how to do it, bring in folks that can help you do that. Start thinking about those redundancies now, and start, selling why it's important to have all this in place right now.
Thank you, Chief. Everybody else on the call, I'm going to call a close to our session today. I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to join. A special thank you to Chief. He's put a lot of work and effort into this presentation for us today, and I hope you all can learn from the tragic incident that happened over in the US and that do continue to unfold, and that we can learn and adapt and protect ourselves as best as we can. Till we speak to you all again, thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.